So I think we were close to 1963, the first international convention in Haifa. So at that time I lived in Austria, and our National Assembly prepared, of course, very well to go to Haifa together. And but we also sent the ballots, to be quite sure. And for this, of course, one had a special meeting, not as a part of an NSA meeting, really for the election we came together. But then we got the ballots again when we arrived. So this was a very great excitement, of course, for everybody, to elect this divinely guided institution again. It still is taking me the breath when I think about this. The only divinely guided institution in this earth. And it was excellently prepared. The organization was really, as always, if one comes to Haifa for an international convention, it is something very special. But at that time it was organized by the heads of the cause and the International Bahá'í Council. You know, Rui Khanum said we measured it with small measurements and so on, what she had from her father as an architect. And because she said we all were of the opinion that the room where it should take place is in the house of Abdul Baha and of course of Shoghi Effendi. So the hall, the ones who were in the meanwhile in Haifa have certainly visited with their pilgrim group the hall of the house of Abdul Baha. There is the big hall, and then there are two like balconies on the right and on the left. These doors were taken off and so on, and it was really, each centimeter was used. The seats were signed which National Assembly has to sit here next according to the alphabet. So Austria was very much in the beginning because of the alpha, not because of our wonderful deeds. We had still with great problems, we had managed it to win the plan. Then there was first pilgrimage organized, and the sleeping was organized, who is sleeping where and with whom. They were brought mixed with members of other NSAs in the rooms, that we really could meet many, many friends whom we most of the time didn't meet before. We were all aware that it was only to be elected women after above 21. And the hands were very, very busy in telling all the national assemblies that hands of the cause and Universal House of Justice are two parallels. They never meet, because they didn't want to be elected, because we thought, and we have different tasks. So it happened that this was, of course, followed by the friends who understood this. Rumor was Rui Khanum still got votes, but this kind of things can happen. It's rumor. I wasn't one of the tellers at that time. And so after this first pilgrimage, which a short pilgrimage of 3 days, I think was it, that we could make, which we all enjoyed very, very much. But we didn't see any hand. The hands were disappeared, were really disappeared at that time. We didn't want to be seen, because it could come into our mind again. Oh yeah, of course, he is so wonderful. And so we didn't meet any hand before the election was done. We were in the house of Abdul-Bahá, in one balcony there behind, and there was, I didn't see, I think there were the doors in at the beginning, when we came in to sit down to find our place and so on. And then the meeting started with a prayer, with prayers, of course. And the name of the end of the course. He was here with Rui Khanum, who organized the things and who called the names afterwards and so on. It was Rui Khanum, and the name I forgot before is Paul Henny. Now it came, I forgot completely. Dear Paul Henny. Yeah. When it was silent and the prayers were said, the readings were read, the names were called. The last prayer by the way, was, oh my God, unite the hearts of your servants. And this is for me always the important prayer which is said before an election. Then the names were called. The National Spiritual Assembly members got up in a row and casted their ballot. And we have had our dear Mr. Pöllinger with us. He was a very, very early friend who declared in the 1920s in Stuttgart, because he was nearly blind and he got no work in Austria, and he went to Stuttgart, and there he became a Bahá'í, and he learned massage. And he received a tablet from Abdul-Bahá, and Abdul-Bahá wrote to him that he should go to his country and spread the faith there. So he immediately, he didn't think a moment if I get a work there or not, because it was in the 20s, in the inflation in any way, and he nearly blind, he went there immediately. There was no doubt at all for a second. So he went to Vienna, he finally also married there, and he was the Bahá'í in Austria until he passed away. And how happy he was, you can imagine, when he could come to Haifa for this international convention and elect this divinely ordained institution. It must have been something very special for him, and I know it was. He was a very, very loving friend. So we all casted our vote, sat down again and prayed for the next ones, and prayed and prayed. This room was full of prayers. It was really, you could nearly touch it. This spirit of prayers and of guidance by Paula and Abdul-Bahá, of course by the Bab and by Shoghi Effendi. When this election was finished, we all went out and all were free, could go to Bahá'í, could go wherever we wanted. We also had, of course, buses organized. And the dear tellers, we got also their bus and were brought to another house, I think. I'm not sure now. They were disappeared, and we didn't see them anymore on this day. Then we had a nice time in Bahá'í. I think all of us went to Bahá'í. And there we could go to the shrine, to the mansion, and we could walk in the gardens. How it is. This is at every international convention the same. And then we were brought back to Haifa by buses, and we tried to find something to eat with someone, and so on. We went together. And then the next morning was the exciting thing. It was in a hall in Haifa, in the biggest hall at that time. Now we have quite bigger halls. And there one could sit how one wanted and so on. And then there was, I wanted to say, by the way, most of the National Assembly sent the letters, their ballots, but still one could get new ballots and could change the vote if one wanted at the election. And I was one of them who changed the election a little bit. And then in the hall up in Bahá'í, in Haifa, I was sitting in the middle of the hall somewhere, and in front of me was one whose name I have put into change. He was just sitting in front of me, and now the teller came, the main teller came to announce the election, and he read the first 5 names. He put down his paper, and we thought, my goodness. And he said, these are the names you were waiting for. And after a while, he took it up again and said the rest before. And then, when all 9 were announced, a great happiness and joy and clapping, and of course, great happiness was in this house, with the exception of one who was sitting in front of me. He heard his name, and he was weeping. He wanted so much to go back to his people there, who needed help and so on. He was so weeping. He went out, of course, with all the other 9s, and here we were and were represented. And the friends came and wanted signatures and all this kind of stuff. It was a great experience. Yeah, and then in the afternoon, this lasted the whole morning. I think we didn't start immediately with consultation. Really, I do not remember. But there was the afternoon, there was the consultation, where everybody could bring up what we had to bring up and so. And of course, at that time, it was Morocco who was in great difficulties. The French were in prison and so on. And we were praying for the French, and it was, they told us how it was in America when someone came from Morocco or from I don't know where, and all the journalists asked about the Bahá'ís in Morocco and so. them and how we came into difficulties of explanation. Of course, unfortunately, already at that time it was not possible for the friends in the Arabian countries, and from Iran they couldn't come. And about the friends in Arabia, you were already a pioneer? Not, you were at that time?
I was 74.
74, you went there, yeah. So this is at all the international conventions that there are missing some national assemblies. And there is always a very wonderful big bunch of red roses which remember most of the time the friends in Iran, because they are always in difficulties there. And there, of course, it was also for the friends in Morocco. Yeah, we got to know the African friends at that conference, at that convention. For instance, the secretary of the National Spiritual Assembly was a very, very young friend, and he had something to say, and he wanted to start with singing and so on. What he did, of course, as you do it in Africa, you're happy in Africa. Also, the life is very difficult. And in front of all of us was, of course, always Rui Khanum. And she knew many friends already at that time. Also, her real journeys started after the election, when she really knew afterwards all the friends, all over the world. Yeah. This was this first election. It were, I think, 3 days of consultation, and then again very well arranged and organized was the journey from Haifa and of course from Tel Aviv to London for the first international conference in London in the Albert Hall. And there, most of the friends, who could go, went there, of course, but there were certainly also some who could not. I don't remember one or the other, because we were in one of very full planes, and there again one could exchange and so on. And when in London, where started the next day the big conference in the Albert Hall. In the meanwhile, the other friends from the different countries have all come to London, and one met, and it was this in the newspaper, this big headline, "The Kissing Religion," because the Baha'is, after so many years, we haven't seen each other and so on, and kissed each other, and how it is when the Baha'is come together. And then 2 hands had to remain in Haifa, of course. Haifa can never be without anyone there. And it was very typical. It were Mr. Fesi and and Adelbert who remained there. And who came, it was when it changed during the conference. 2 went back and they came. And yeah, then this great conference where Rui Khanum spoke to the friends about Shoghi Effendi, and of course her voice disappeared, and the tears flow with her, the tears flow with all of us, and the African friends found the solution. We started the Bahá'í song, the greatest name, and the whole hall was singing, and Ruichanum got her strength again and could go on. It was a very, very special experience. This conference was then, of course, insofern also something very special, because there, first time, the Universal House of Justice was introduced to the whole Bahá'í community. We were standing there with 9 friends, very, very humble and modest, and it was so wonderful. And the hands of the course, always another one, opened the meeting with prayer and so on. It was very, very touching, everything. And then the Universal House of Justice read their first message, where we brought all the thanks also to the hands of the course and gave an out view to the future in their very first message. It was so great, so wonderful. Yeah, it was a very exciting time, this year 1963. Then 1964.
Do you want to stop this part and we can go on?
We can go on.